This video is brought to you by our partner NordVPN. All dictators throughout history have had passions or obsessions of their own. But if we analyze one of the greatest dictators, one that immediately comes to mind when thinking of dictatorship, namely Adolf Hitler, we find many peculiarities: his passion for his dog Blondie, his passion for Wagner, or his close friendship with an architect who was even appointed as the Minister of Armaments. What architecture had to do with industrial organization only Hitler knew. As much as his choice turned out to be quite fortunate, yet that man, Hitler's architect, also known as the Devil's Architect, would play a much more significant role than simply realizing the architectural fantasies of the Führer. He would be the faithful executor, but only to a certain extent, of the dictator's desires, and in the post-war era, he would have a role first as a witness and then subsequently as an unpunishable accused, which should make us reflect. Our character today is Albert Speer, Hitler's favored architect, and one of the most interesting men in the inner circle of the Nazi dictator. Speaking of passion, there are those who have made digital protection not only their passion but also, above all, their company's mission. This is the case of our friends and supporters at NordVPN, our sponsor and supporter, who offer you a great deal to join. Just click on the link below or in the video description, and it includes an exclusive discount plus 4 extra months on all biennial plans, always with the usual 30-day money-back guarantee. NordVPN offers various advantages, starting from access to international streaming content not available in our country due to various blocks, and then improved security on all public Wi-Fi networks. Think of those in airports, stations, and hotels. So the idea is for travelers, but many will wonder why they should pay for a VPN service like NordVPN instead of using a free VPN. One of the main ways free VPNs earn money is through selling your personal data to brokers or advertising companies, which then use this data to learn more about users' purchasing habits to make their campaigns more effective to your detriment. The exact opposite of NordVPN, which has a decidedly reasonable price, indeed very, very affordable, giving you the security to browse in complete tranquility, away from curious spies, as well as protecting our videos from malicious actors with the ability to access valid content worldwide and with the full satisfaction or money-back guarantee. Well, what more could you want? I don't know. How does an architect enter the inner circle of a paranoid, obsessive dictator like Hitler? It's an interesting question. To answer it, we must delve into Hitler's personal roots. Hitler, as you know, was born into an Austrian family with artistic aspirations. However, he was rejected by the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna. His drawings were not liked, not considered artistic. Instead, he was inadvertently steered by some professors towards architecture or even engineering. His drawings and designs were not harmonious, they seemed like palaces, he was told, but he didn't care. It's only several years later, already in the 1930s, when Nazism is increasingly asserting itself in Germany, ultimately seizing control of the country and shaping it in its own image, that Hitler rediscovers this architectural vein of his. It's not the only true artistic passion he rediscovers. There's also the passion for Wagner, a passion that accompanies him from his youth onwards, to the point of forcing the entire party elite to attend the annual Wagnerian festival in Bayreuth. But there's more than just that. There's that passion for architecture that resurfaces. After the Reichstag fire, one of the darkest episodes in the Nazi Party's rise to power, the Reichstag, the German parliament, is officially set ablaze by a foreign communist extremist, although many clues point towards a self-made act by the SA on Hitler's own orders, or someone within his circle. Regardless, after the fire, a reconstruction of the Reichstag is proposed, but not only that, there's also a restructuring of the Chancellery, and for this latter role of restructuring, a young architect is involved. His name is Albert Speer. Not yet 30 years old, he's an established professional who has undertaken valuable studies and was a pupil of a great architect. Like Irisha Tesseract, he has collaborated with prestigious studios in the field. But he's not what you would call an early Nazi, is he? He only joined the party in 1931 after insistence from his students and from the Faculty of Architecture. urging him to attend at least some meetings or rallies of the increasingly powerful Nazi Party. Speer had always kept himself distant from politics, never revealing his sympathies or antipathies. He remained balanced, one of the few Germans capable during the tumultuous years of the 1920s and early 1930s to remain equidistant from an increasingly turbulent environment. Let's remember that during that period, starting from the 1920s and into the early 1930s, Germany experienced very chaotic days: the collapse of the economy, the collapse of the mark, which was worth no more than the paper and ink used to print it, politics becoming frenetic, the SA marches in the streets, attacks on opponents, the parliament dissolving repeatedly, unable to support an executive, the old President von Hindenburg, who in the end, after failing with von Papen and Co. von Schneider, was forced to appoint him, the hated Adolf Hitler, the corporal with the mustache, a man who was diametrically opposed to the traditions represented by Hindenburg. And that man with the mustache had grandiose plans in mind, even on a scenic level. It was the period when the figurative art of Joseph Thor was emerging in Germany. Thor, a sculptor who embodied in his works the physicality and camaraderie propagated by Nazism. His works were unmistakable, seen everywhere, even making it to the World Exhibition in Paris in 1937, dominating the pavilion dedicated to Germany. Even jokingly within Nazi circles, the sculptor was called Thorax for his preference for muscular torsos in his creations. But that's another story, one that Asperger, despite being a sculptor, studied. Of course, a sculptor and an architect, but the art of aesthetics is clear, sometimes they go hand in hand. Speer presented himself to Hitler as a young architect with excellent training and skills, willing to realize even the boldest visual dreams of the future dictator, a future dictator eager to celebrate shortly after his rise to power, the myth of Nazism. He did so at the Nuremberg rally, immortalized by the director Leni Riefenstahl in the film Triumph of the Will, one of the masterpieces of the era, alongside Olympia. And in that film you can see Speer's first realizations. At first Hitler is somewhat wary, but when Hitler grants him virtually unlimited credit, Speer doesn't hesitate. Rather, he realizes he has an incredible opportunity. Akin to Faust-facing Mephistopheles, understanding he can sell his soul to the devil to see his projects realized, even the grandest ones, even those theoretically impossible. From then on, he takes care of setting up the Zeppelin Stadium for the Nuremberg rally and becomes Hitler's favored architect, not only for setups or the refurbishment of the Chancellery or the new Reichstag. But it's not just for that, because Hitler has in mind a restructuring, actually a total remake of the world, and for this there remains a model commissioned by Hitler according to Speer's design, and it's called Welhauspstadt Germany, the capital of the world. It's a model of what the new Berlin should be like after Nazism has won the war and conquered practically the entire globe. Berlin is to become the new megalopolis, the capital of the entire planet, a megalopolis based on a blend of classical art and the latest innovations, abandoning, however, rationalist architecture. The model of Welthauptstadt Germania is something fascinating but also dangerous. Everything is shaped simply to make it bigger, more enchanting, more efficient, more majestic than what already exists. The triumphal arch, modelled after existing examples, for instance the French one, but bigger. The dome of the new Reichstag, larger than that of the Pantheon, much larger. It's all an exaggeration, a desire to magnify what should be the focal point of the new superior race. Hitler spends several hours at the drawing table with Speer, diverting those hours even from governance, particularly as the war breaks out and they devote themselves to war efforts. Yet he does so willingly because it's not so much a distraction as it is a commitment to the future. Hitler is convinced he will win the war, convinced his dreams will come true, and fortunately for them they never do. He hopes in all of this, accompanied by Speer, who shows him what is feasible, what needs to be revised, always offering suggestions, always gaining further opportunities for work. The perspective begins to change later in 1942, not so much in line with what's happening on the battlefront. Remember, 1942 is the beginning. 43 is the turning point of World War II, starting with Midway in 42, continuing to El Alamein in October-November 42, and ending at Stalingrad in late January 43, the three battles that changed the course of World War II. But in 42, Fritz Todt dies. Who was Todt? He was an engineer, primarily the Minister of Armaments and German heavy industry. Upon Todt's unexpected death, an architect is appointed as his successor. Strange, an architect instead of an engineer in the organization of both defensive works and, above all, the production of armaments. This raises eyebrows among various party bigwigs, and even more so among the generals, as he's simply seen as one of Hitler's lackeys, yes, his architect, the man with whom the dictator hunches over the drawing table, sketching out grand, enormous constructions for the future, but isn't used to managing what needs to be done immediately or handling the pace of production. However, he silences his critics with deeds, demonstrating in a short time his ability to take the reins of German war industry and continue Todt's work without interruption. Indeed, in some ways, improving management, for example, by facing the need to repair facilities damaged by bombings with a certain speed in 1944, despite the German economy already being in crisis, despite Allied bombings, despite the increasingly evident scarcity of raw materials, Speer manages to achieve decidedly good results. Not only is this seen on the battlefield, where the new Tiger and King Tiger tanks begin to make their presence felt, but also in the production of what are supposed to be wonder weapons. We've already discussed this in a dedicated video on the channel. These are miraculous weapons that are supposed to change the course of the war. Speer is Hitler's trusted man, but trust is never eternal. In fact, attention is drawn to him by the Allies, who begin to take an interest in this rather strange minister. The journalist and writer Sebastian Hefner writes in the London Observer about Speer, regarding the Baroque square of Bari, we may manage to get rid of the various Hitlers, but with Speer, we will have to reckon for a long time. Why? Because he is a pure technician, a skilled organizer, a brilliant young man without baggage, and without any other purpose than to follow his own path, with no means other than his own technical and managerial abilities. In short, for those who know how, Speer has proven his worth. However, that trust that Hitler had given him unconditionally at a certain point decides to withdraw it. He decides this in March 1945, facing the Nero Decree, the decree with which Hitler orders scorched earth. Hitler understands that Germany is destined to lose, and to lose disastrously. He doesn't want to leave anything behind, absolutely nothing. Warsaw razed to the ground wasn't enough. He wanted to see Paris razed too. But it didn't happen. He wants the entire Germany to become a leveled wasteland with dynamite, not from Allied bombings, not from combat. The Germans themselves must destroy everything. Nothing must remain, especially of the German production apparatus. The Allies and Soviets must not seize anything. Here Speer disobeys for the first time after many years. He cannot bring himself to destroy the patient work of years, not just his own, but also that of the industrialists and those who physically built those factories and plants. He resists. He even sabotages the plans for destruction. For this reason, Hitler doesn't order his dismissal or execution, but he sidelines him. Speer is still in the Führer bunker in Berlin, shortly before its fall. He escapes before Berlin is isolated, fleeing to the north to Flensburg, near the old border with Denmark, which ceased to exist in 1940. In Flensburg, a new government is formed, the von Krosigk government, charged with a crime, that of authorizing the enslavement of masses of prisoners and forced laborers forced to board trains from all over Europe and go to work, indeed as slaves until death in German industries. Speer is found guilty and sentenced to 20 years in prison, which he serves in the fortress prison of Spandau. He's not the only inmate. We don't know Spandau. He exits once his sentence is served. But while at Spandau, he writes a lot. Speer writes 2 books that become bestsellers, Memories of the Third Reich and Secret Diaries of Spandau. What does Speer write in these books? He provides his version of events, but it's just that, a version. In light of what emerges from the work of historians, Speer's version crumbles, and it's revealed that he lied and he knew it. He only defended himself to save his life. This is told to him in the face by the Nazi hunter, Simon Wiesenthal, when they meet several years later. If we had known then what we know today, rest assured, you would have been hanged in Nuremberg, Wiesenthal tells him. Because what did Speer know? He knew much more than he let on. He knew about the final solution. He was present for Himmler's speeches in October 43, when, speaking to SS generals, Gauleiters, and other party officials, Himmler clearly stated what they had in mind regarding the Jewish solution. They had decided on extermination, and Speer knew this. Speer had tried to defend himself by saying that he had planned to assassinate Hitler in the last days by introducing poison gas into the pipelines of the underground bunker. Beneath the Chancellery, a bunker he had designed and built himself. But it was a fake, a 3-year-old plan. It wasn't true. He had never thought of doing such a thing. He had only declared it to try to gain credibility as a repentant. In reality, although Speer was no longer in Hitler's favor for opposing indiscriminate destruction, he had never renounced Hitler. He had only tried to save himself. Albert Speer dies as a free man in a hospital in London on September 1st, 1981. He leaves behind the memory of his architectural works, leaving behind the looming shadow of Nazism, his relationships with Hitler, that model of the never-realized capital of the world, Germania. He leaves behind his lies, his evasions, and also a daughter, Hilde, who has tried to shake off the stigma of being the daughter of the devil's architect, Der Hexer, as he was called. In 2019, she received recognition from the German Jewish History for her commitment to promoting art and science among young Jewish women. It was an attempt on her part to change ex post the course of memory, to show that the evil seed can die, and when it dies, it can generate something different, something completely opposite. She changed her name to have nothing to do with her parent, a parent who was undoubtedly brilliant at his work, but was also a cold opportunist and calculator. So let's reflect sometimes on what life can bring. It can bring tragedy, mourning, death, destruction, and even disgust for life itself. What we leave behind, what will follow us after our death, can be the memory of being monstrous, or it can be a message of redemption carried forward by those we have generated. The evil that men do lives after them. The good is oft interred with their bones. William Shakespeare, Julius Caesar. Not for Hilde, the daughter of Albert Speer, who has disowned the surname, disowned the past, and wanted to turn a new page. It's not easy. She's not the daughter of the devil's architect. She wanted to show that German doesn't equal Nazi, that it's a name from the past, and that actions are worth much more than any word.